Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode, we have Netflix 156th film. It's from 2018. It's a psychological horror thriller called The Perfection. It's directed by Richard Shepard. It stars Allison Williams, Logan Browning, Stephen Weber, and Alaina Huffman. I am Jesse, and I am joined, as usual, by MJ. Hello.
How are you, mate?
Good. How are you?
Yes, I'm very, very well. I cannot wait to talk about this movie. And we were just literally talking about it off air, and we we're worried that we're going to start talking about it before. Let's just push record because there's so much to talk about.
This is your type of cup. This is your cup of tea. This is like, when I was watching this, is like this is the type of film that I know MJ will appreciate in somehow.
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of that. I got to a point where I was talking to my wife about it yesterday because I just got ideas about this film. I got to talk about it with someone who didn't even watch it. So this is the beauty of why we do this.
Excellent. Well, lead us into your Fast Flicks, where you're going to tell us a quick summary of what it's all about.
Yes. So Fast Flicks for the Perfection is a talented cello player reunites with her old mentors and meets their new protege.
Nice. Yeah, I've said two musical prodigies build a connection through their mentor, but that correlation may not be what it seems.
Oh, that's really good.
I spent a bit of time on that one. I was impressed. I was very happy.
This is good because I wanted to do like a really basic, because the whole thing about this film is that you give too much away, you ruin it. So
yep.
Fast Flicks, you could have started talking about parts of the plot even that would give things away. So you really got that nicely. What's a cello player called? Are they called like cellist, or are they just called cello player? Like
a musician?
you got like a pianist and a flautist.
Yeah.
Are they called cellists? Maybe they are. I don't know.
I'd go with that. If you're going to refer to it, just stick with it.
I think I'm just going to keep saying cello player.
Just stick with that the whole way through. There's nothing wrong with that. We do talk about how the film has come together and how it's landed on Netflix. So what could you find on this one?
Before I do, I'm going to do a spoiler alert because I'm not too sure when I'm accidentally going to jump into a spoiler. Normally I don't in this section, but we're going to spoil this film. And truly, if you do want to watch this film, firstly, don't listen to what we're going to talk about because it will spoil it. Secondly, my advice would be don't even watch a trailer. Go into this film as cold as you can. And then when you're done, come listen to us talk about it, because you're probably going to want to let your ideas out there in the world somewhere and hear people who aren't very educated talk about it, try to make sense of everything. But
it's a really good point because this is definitely one of the ones that we've done in a long time that you need to go into this cold. So if you want to be cold, press pause because you're hurting our feelings, but also because you're going to save yourself from having it ruined. So do your best without ruining it. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Now we can ruin it, because they've all gone and they're coming back. Don't worry, they're coming back. But so this movie in September 2017, that's when I first found some information on it. It was announced that Miramax was going to produce and finance the film, which is big. So financing it straight up. Richard Shepard was on board to direct a screenplay that he wrote alongside Nicole Snyder and Eric Charmello. Bill Block was the producer at that point. In October, so the following month, Allison Williams joined the cast of the film. She'd worked with Richard Shepard on a few episodes of Girls. Well, she's on Girls, and Richard Shepard had done a few episodes of Girls as director. And then a couple of months later, Logan Browning also joined the cast. So we had our two leads by December. As I sort of said, Miramax was already on board to finance and produce the whole film. So they didn't have a distributor at this point, but they did have the means to basically make the entire film. And that film had its premiere at Fantastic Fest basically a year later, September 2018. And that's when there was a bit of a bidding war for the distribution rights. And Netflix acquired those worldwide rights and they released the film on the 24th of May, 2019. I found it really interesting that obviously Richard Shepard was excited about Netflix being able to buy this film. For a number of reasons, because if they had have had a theatrical distributor, which every director talks about how much they love the fact that their film is going to be in a theater for everyone to enjoy in probably the best way possible. But at the same time, and I think this is a really good point for this film, is that he was really worried about the marketing of the film, because as we see a lot of the time, a theatrical distributor would probably love to reveal a little bit more in a trailer than they'd want, because they're doing all this work, they're spending all this money on this film. They want people to go and see it. And he sort of had a bit more of a chance with Netflix to allow them to cut a trailer that it would still give some stuff away, but it didn't give nearly as much away. And that was probably one of the main thoughts that they had from the beginning, was to make sure that whoever distributes the movie obviously really loves the film, but at the same time they can respect the type of movie it is, not reveal too much, and therefore take the joy out of the film, which is a really good point. I didn't watch the trailer for this film, but
the
I can't imagine trying to cut a trailer.
It's interesting when you're talking about the trailer, because the trailer and even the when you hover over the film on Netflix, it sort of starts playing that teaser almost, and it makes it out to be more like a creature feature. It doesn't go into any details realistically about what this is about, and it's an interesting ploy, I guess, that obviously people with these types of films want to keep that core element, or that shock tactic, or that underlying theme that they're trying to go with as close to their chest as possible, because you want audiences to walk in, like we said before, as cold as possible. So they do use a lot of that first half of that film, I guess, those shots that if you saw it and you wanted to see sort of like a horror film that's about zombies or plagues or things like that, then you're probably going to walk away a little bit not disappointed, but a little bit confused with where the market is at.
Or you'll appreciate the journey they put you on, because I think that's part of it, is being shocked and being surprised and going, oh shit, like that's taken a turn. But again, I can understand a theatrical distributor want to be like, no, the crux of this film is X, and we need to show X. And you're watching this film going, well, I've seen in the trailer that this happened, so something's going to change, and that would definitely ruin the viewing experience. I just also want to touch on the fact that the cello playing in this movie, firstly, the music that was written was original pieces, and Allison Williams and Logan Browning had to learn how to play the cello. Now, I find this interesting because I have no idea what a good cello player would sound like, and in my head, these people are supposed to be like the elite of the elite. And I'm sure if you've got a great ear for the cello, you're probably watching it going, oh, this isn't that good. These two aren't as good as they want. But they obviously said from the start, we're not using doubles here. We want it to look as authentic as possible. So both the lead actors spent months before learning how to actually play those pieces specifically that they were playing in the film. And from all reports, it's a very difficult instrument to play. So how's that for part of your job?
I have no musical talent at all, so yeah, it's a good thing to admire. I think it took me 2 years to get my first grade of clarinet when I was in high school. So everyone else did it in the first 6 months, and I think it took me 24 months to get it done. So yeah, well, anyone that can play a tune, well done.
No, you got me covered. I don't think I've ever played an instrument in my life apart from recorder in primary school when you have to.
I think if you say recorder to a lot of people that aren't in Australia, they're probably like, what on earth is going on?
Oh, yeah. What are they? Yeah. Why is that part of the curriculum in Australia that everyone has to play recorder?
Really interesting. I don't know if it's still something that happens, but it's a really good point. You look back on that and you're like, it was on that book list, everyone had to have one.
Maybe it's such a cheap, it's basically just plastic. It's so cheap to buy. Yeah, it's a horrible sounding instrument too.
I remember when I had to do my examination for clarinet, I played Titanic, the theme. That was my exam song. Oh god.
That would have sounded great. And you obviously nailed it.
I think I got a pass, which is the lowest thing you can get without failing. Sorry, keep going.
Well, that's basically it. I found it quite interesting. So Netflix came on board. Feels like the perfect fit for it.
Yeah, I think I read there were quite a few interviews with the director Richard Shepard, and I think this is obviously to do with that Fantastic Fest. That I think a lot of the press, took a lot of grabs from what he was saying, and he really wanted to. And I saw this in multiple places that he was pushing that idea that a lot of the shots that he used were inspired by Brian De Palma and a lot of influence from sort of Korean types of films too. So, and you can visually see what he was trying to do with those types of shots too. the only other thing I've got is the tagline, which which is our new little favorite thing to look at. But this one was interesting. The tagline is "It's time to face the music," which which does
that's good.
Sits all right, doesn't it? Yeah,
that's good. It works. It works with the twist, and it works enough without it as well. No, I'm happy with that. I'm actually actively avoiding reading the tagline because I want my reveal to be live
good
on this podcast with you.
Well, this one was pretty easy to find. It was literally on the poster. Some of them haven't been on posters, so that one was pretty easy. So it's pretty large.
They're hard to avoid.
Yeah. I guess talk about awards. It's been a while. This one had 3 nominations and won all 3, which is we probably haven't seen in a while. So it won the best streaming premiere film at the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. It won best editing at the Fright Meter Awards, and also won the best non-theatrical release at the Online Film Critics Society Awards. So 3 from 3, which is a good little standing.
All awards that they wouldn't have won if they weren't on Netflix, by the sounds of it. They all seem to be streaming related.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, it was filmed in Vancouver in Canada. I think that if I couldn't find anywhere, because I was really intrigued to see those. At the start, there's quite a lot of walking through city streets and things, and it did have a very was it Singapore though? I can't. What city was it in?
Shanghai.
It had a really good vibe. If they didn't actually film in Shanghai, I feel like
I didn't say that. I must admit, I assumed it was all in Shanghai. They've done that.
No, everything said it was all done in British Columbia throughout Vancouver and that area. So obviously, I think a few of the establishing shots and sort of those they were obviously done as a side. But I think well done. If
well done indeed.
They confused me. Yeah. All right. Consensus time. What are people saying?
It's a 6.2 out of 10 on IMDb, 39,000 ratings that's based on, and a 2.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd, nearly 52,000 ratings on Letterboxd. So they got good eyeballs. I remember you saying last week that you remember when this one was released and you sort of felt like it was everywhere, but I don't remember it at all. And even seeing things now, I don't remember it, but people watched it and they kind of liked it.
It's a lot of eyeballs, like for Letterboxd. That's big, and even IMDb, that's pretty large for I mean, realistically, Allison Williams people will know from Girls and Get Out, but it doesn't have another.
She's not a household name, though.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's quite a good effort with the amount of people that have gone out of their way. Same with Rotten Tomatoes, I guess it's fairly positive. It's certified fresh, which we've had a couple recently, which is nice. So it sits on 71% on 98 critic reviews on that higher end. And the audience had it a little bit lower, down to 57%. And that was on over 500, though, which again is a lot of people on Rotten Tomatoes. You know, sometimes we're seeing like 2 or 3 people on Rotten Tomatoes in some of the films we've done. So more than 500 is a lot.
We haven't bad Rotten Tomatoes for a while, so it's a good chance to say that we're comparing. Everyone uses Rotten Tomatoes, but everyone uses it. Oh, it's this on Rotten Tomatoes, and 500 people watched it. 50,000 people watched it on Letterboxd. What would you rather a sample size of? Come on.
I feel like I don't want to sound snobbish, but I agree. All right, let's continue. I think this is time for us to talk about our early thoughts and where we're sitting before we get into the crux of it. So, what are you thinking prior to that discussion?
Yeah, this movie, it kind of rocked for me. I really liked it. Like the mystery and the twists and turns, and obviously the fact that it changed directions on 2 or 3 really big times. And the shifting story actually was really great. It was really fun. I found the whole journey engaging. It kept me on my toes. I enjoyed it. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about the whole crux of the narrative being based on a rapey academy for gifted cello players. But the first act, it takes you on this really fun and unexpected journey, and you start to visualize where the story's going to go. And then bam, it just changes completely. And then you kind of get it and you're okay with it. And just when you think you know what this new direction is going, then bam, it changes again. And I think just in general, I kind of love a movie where you never really know who the crazy one is. You know that someone's off somewhere and there's a crazy person somewhere. You don't know who it's going to be, and it keeps changing in your mind. And I think they do that really well in this.
Good. That's a really good summation. I like that. I'm going to be a bit of a letdown. I couldn't get into this one.
I knew you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I knew you wouldn't.
I think my expectations were too high. Because I'd wanted to see this since it came out. I kept away from spoilers, and like we mentioned before, I think that you have to do that to, like, for this film to have that impact that it wants, I guess. And it just sort of reeked a bit more of like a D grade horror film with some really over the top acting performances that sort of prevented that message that they were trying to get through to me to truly shine. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I must admit, I think this movie is, as much as there is a big message that they're trying to give, I think this movie is less about the message and more about the roller coaster, I guess, for me.
Good. I'm looking forward to hearing where it took you, because there's a couple of bits that I agree with that, and there's a couple of bits that I don't. So let's look at some characters and start off with.
I think this is going to be good.
About where we stand with, and there's not an awful lot of characters that we really need to talk about, but start us off with Charlotte.
Yeah, so look, we've got this girl who's clearly been messed up by years of abuse and sexual abuse from a very young age. It's bound to mess you up, and I suppose the journey of discovery that she goes on to gain clarity, if we want to call it clarity, that all happens before we actually meet her on screen. So the Charlotte that we meet has kind of gone through this whole cycle of dealing with the trauma in her life. But there's something off about her the entire time. And that feeling is kind of what makes all these twists and turns possible. It's all really believable because we've got this character who, if she turns out to be incredibly normal, I can understand it. If she turns up to be batshit crazy, I can understand it. And it all kind of just really works because she's surprisingly tactical and measured throughout this whole journey. When you actually look back on it, everything that sort of happens, plan by plan, step by step by her. But she never loses that glint of crazy throughout all of it. And that's even relevant in the final scene when, she's obviously in a big knife fight with someone. She's still got that menacing craziness to her. And I think Allison Williams is kind of at her chilling, get out kind of best in this situation, where it's the first half of the film, like, oh, this is just the exact same character from Get Out. But then she goes to another level and you find out that she's kind of driving the whole thing. So I thought she makes this character work, which makes the film work.
Everything that you've sort of touched on, like, I reckon I've got all those words that you said, but just in a different sort of a tiny switch of a take where, and to me, that idea that you mentioned too, trauma is where she starts off for me. And we start off with seeing her mother, slowly disintegrate, I guess. I think the setup with her and obviously this is that false lead that they're trying to do with her being a jealous type character who wants that fame and that fortune and the glamour, I guess, that Lizzie's got, who we'll talk about in a sec. But that was fine. I enjoyed watching that and seeing that. But then that switch, it let me down a bit because, I liked the reveal of when she takes her wig off at the end and it shows these hard times that, she's had to deal with this cult or whatever you want to call them, as well as the passing of her mother. But, and you mentioned this too, I could not shake that idea of her from Get Out. And I think I teach that film, and so I think I've seen that film 20 times. So to me, all I see when I see Allison Williams is Rose in Get Out.
Right.
And so the twist and the reveal just didn't sit with me, because to me, that's all she is. So if this character was cast to someone else, maybe I would have loved this film. And that's probably just me personally, because of how often I've had to pull that character apart, pull scenes apart from another film. And there's not a lot of films where I've had to watch, like, not that I have to, but that I've watched them so many times that it's like indoctrinated almost. So I think that's just a personal thing for me. And I can see exactly what you're saying.
It's a good point. I mean, I think Allison Williams works with the familiarity in that role because she does the crazy really well. So I was expecting the crazy, and that's what helps the switch work even better. But man, there's nothing chilling as that scene in Get Out when Chris is just like, get the keys, Rose, get the keys. Like, it doesn't matter how many times I've watched that movie, my heart is just thumping watching that scene.
Babe, you know I can't give you the keys.
Just because the scene starts, especially when you first watch it, the scene starts and you don't really suspect it. But as it goes on and it goes on, you're like, this isn't right. Something's off here. And then when she says that, you just sorry.
That's great. I need to recap that scene again, heading towards the exam coming up soon for my senior kids. So that's our key scene for Rose's character development. So thank you for refreshing my mind.
It is a belter. Let's move on to Lizzie. Look, I did call out Allison Williams. I thought it was a great performance. I have to do the same for Logan Browning here, and I'm worried that you're going to say the opposite. But I thought she smashes this performance out of the park. I think this character goes through so many different variations, and Logan Browning just really nails it. Like, you think of the Lizzie at the start when they're watching the kids play the cello and they're deciding who's going to win, and she talks about the sexual chemistry and all, and then she sort of goes into her being, her own self, and then obviously dealing with the trauma of losing her hand. Like, she just goes through so many different phases, and she does it really well. And I think the irony of this character in general is that it truly did take a barbaric, life-changing attack to make her see what she'd gotten herself into. And as I said, the Lizzie that we meet at the start is one of the most down-to-earth elite musicians that you can really imagine. She doesn't really seem like she is an elite musician when you actually meet her and talk to her. And I suppose that's the bubble of comfort that was created at this academy. I mean, we need to understand why people are keen to stick out this academy regardless of what's going on. And I think that's a scary insight into a world where sexual abuse is normalized from a very young age, that it feels comfortable, and you actually don't want to be out of it because it's the world that and that works for you. So they discuss that quite well using Lizzie as a pilot.
Yeah. I think this was probably the type of performance that sort of let the rest of the film down for me, because it was, especially once, like, and I agree, like you mentioned, that the first part, you have no inkling that there's any concerns with her. But I also feel like we didn't get to know enough about her. Like, I feel like we see this new protege that they're trying, this young little girl, was it Zhang? I think, I can't remember. Anyway, we see this new girl. Yeah, Zhang. We could have. Why couldn't we have seen some flashbacks of her initiation into the program, or her starting, or her parents saying goodbye to her, just to give a little bit more background? Because I feel like we got that with Charlotte. We got more of that rounded story and development, where with her it was just like, we find out that she's been abused. We find out that she needed an amputation to see this. And to me, like, it just seemed too much of a quick transition without getting any further context behind her journey to that point. And I know that that's part of that plot and the story, that they want that reveal that you weren't expecting what was going to happen. But some of those like some of her especially on the bus, some of her overreaction, I don't know. I just couldn't deal. That was really awkward for me watching a lot of that stuff.
Oh man, I was the exact opposite. I love the bus scene. But,
we'll probably talk about.
I think what you're saying is fair, but I think also there's an assumption that we see a lot more of Charlotte's journey, and I think there's an assumption that Lizzie basically went on a very similar path. If you're showing the same thing over and over again, then you start to go, okay, we get it. But it's a good point as well if you need to connect more with that character.
Yeah, no, and I think you're exactly right that, it'd be too repetitive to show exactly the same story, but even just to show something briefly that was a little bit different in her journey, or some sort of inkling that she knew what was happening to her was wrong at some stage, because obviously Charlotte's worked that out at some stage. So I just would have liked to have seen one acknowledgement of Lizzie at some stage thinking something was off here, rather than her needing that one impactful moment to see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Anton.
All right. Moving on to Anton. Obviously, he's the villain, the slick and suave big bad wolf. But the constant references to the fact that this is a generational academy, and Anton, along with Jeffrey and Tice, were once students there. I think it's obviously in Anton's family, so it was his parents and his grandparents who were running the academy prior to him. And this vile behavior has been normalized. They've grown up with it as a technique that works. There's a level of brainwashing, which is probably a bigger factor than these guys being just kind of sick rapists. And I think there's a line where he says something near the end. He's like, "Oh, I wasn't going to do anything to her. I'm not just a sick pervert." And I think he truly believes that, despite deep down knowing that it's wrong. I think because he's grown up with this, and as I say, as much as it pains me to say, maybe it's a technique that has worked for them. It's got results in terms of them being excellent cello players. So I think there's more to Anton than just being like this sick rapist. Like, he is a guy who has grown up in this world where this is how it's done. And that's a really scary thought, that for generations that has been the norm.
Yeah, really, really good observations. I think, like, when I was looking into this film a bit, there was a lot of commentary. Like, you know, the idea is he's that big deal in the music world, but we don't actually get to see him play at any stage, which, and I guess that's sort of a bit of a reflection at times on probably what the music industry is like. The people who've got the power and the money aren't necessarily the musically talented people. They're the ones that are able to manipulate people and get what they want through doing not necessarily good deeds. And a lot of the commentary I was reading online was talking about, you know, this is that sort of Weinstein-like character. And then there was a lot of people saying back, well, you know, Miramax Films obviously distributed this. That was Weinstein's sort of where he started. But this film was actually announced 3 weeks before those allegations came out. So I think it's still important to acknowledge that this still came out in that time. So you're still reflecting what society's sort of saying at the time. And the thing with me that sort of resonated a little bit was like, and I did not understand it at all, was this idea of that the title perfection, and he's chasing this perfection through people other than himself. And he relates it often to like God, and like, you know, it's being close to God and things like that. And to me, I couldn't understand, like, are these his own delusions in trying to cover up, and he actually understands what he's doing is not right? Because if he relates it to religion and use religion as like as an exit ticket or an exit point, and saying, well, this is what my family, like you mentioned, that family chain that said, this is what God wants of us, this is what's going on, and relating that abuse to religion as well. And I just, that was where it sort of sat with me a little bit. And his wife, Paloma, like, what was with her? Like, seriously, like, it almost would have been better to have him not have a wife. Like, you did not need that character, because he's obviously getting the satisfaction in life that he needs without having her there, and her standing there as almost an accomplice without creating any action or kickback just didn't sit right. Yeah,
look, I'll touch on that now. I agree. I have no idea where Paloma fits into all this. I don't know if I missed something with that, but that made no sense to me in any way. But to your point about God, it's something that I hadn't pondered, because there is lots of references to God. And I just thinking about it now, it's almost as if he recognizes that the acts that he's doing are probably unjust, ungodly, shouldn't be doing them. But his repayment is this music, this perfection, which, as he says, if you play it right, you get close to God, sort of thing. So he's like, look, I'm doing your work by giving you the music that you desire. I know I have to do some really suspect things to get it to you, but that's I'm playing my course. And again, like, deep down, you probably truly believe that that's what he thinks is the case.
Yeah, and I almost, to make him that true villain, take out that line that this has been something that's running through the family, because that almost implies that he's a bit of a victim himself. And I reckon I think
that's important, though. I think that talks about, from a society perspective, that talks about something that has been wrong for so long that it becomes normalized, and that is so much harder to change than just having one guy who's just a little bit fucked in the head.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't want to feel empathy for this guy at all, and that's sort of like, you want to be on board with these two girls the whole way. I don't know. It's a good point though. Like, and I understand why they've done it, but just me personally, I'm like, I want to be on board with these two girls the whole way and make sure they get exactly what they need out of this situation. I don't think I ever really felt much empathy for him, to be frank. It's only when you drill it down that you realize that this is institutionalized behavior, which is probably a bigger and juicier theme to be making a film about, rather than we've just got this sick rapist. Yeah. Excellent. Good. Any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
No, there's not.
All right. Director, anything that you wanted to say about Richard Shepard?
Yeah, I'm not familiar. He's obviously done a couple of features that I haven't seen, which are semi decent features. Done lots of directing TV. I think I read somewhere where he loves making films because he often writes and directs his films, and he does a lot of TV and a lot of pilot work to sort of pay the bills, and then jumps back into a feature film. So it's interesting. I mean, you forget sometimes that this is a fully functioning industry that people need to, pave their way.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I think this was his 11th feature film, and I don't think I'd heard of any of the others, which was interesting.
They had decent cast though, like that. Yeah. He's done some big names. Like he's around.
I went through and I was like, I'm going to list off just a couple of the TV shows just to show that this guy's like got some pretty good work. Like obviously we mentioned Girls before, like did 12 episodes of that on HBO. Did episodes of The Handmaid's Tale, 30 Rock, Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, which probably ties in pretty closely with the ideas that he's done in this. And then, like you mentioned too, the pilots for Ugly Betty, which went on to be a pretty big show on ABC in America, and Criminal Minds as well. Like there's some pretty big shows there.
Yeah, no, he's definitely got his finger on the pulse enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's lead into some scenes. What are some ones that you enjoyed in this?
Yeah, look, we might as well talk about it first up. But I think if you want to talk about memorable scenes, the bus scene for me was really memorable. It had me on the edge of my seat. At this stage, I think I'm watching like Contagion or something like that. This is 100% what I thought. And I was actually thinking to myself, where does the perfection come into this? Where does this title come into? I'm like, all right, I'll figure it out later. But okay, I'm all in for this sort of pandemic type movie in, I guess the outskirts of China and what's going to happen. And that bus scene was so memorable to me because obviously when we think she thinks she's hungover, everyone thinks she's hungover, and in your head, she's not, and you're just wondering where it's going. And it was intense and it was graphic. And that ties obviously right into when they get off the bus, and obviously the bugs in the arm, again, when you don't know that this is her hallucinating, was awesome. It's like, this is next level. She has bugs coming all out of her. I thought that was so great. I don't know if before I keep talking about my next scene, you want to talk about the bus scene and how you didn't like it, because I might as well keep on topic.
No, I'm not going to mention the okay, all right. Let's talk about the bus then. So you want me to talk about the things I didn't like about the bus now?
just the bus scene, yeah. We're talking about the bus scene.
I'll start off. So I don't know, just the whole idea of her trying to stay conscious, and the people on the bus and the interactions on the bus, and the idea of Lizzie knowing how to speak the local language and not even attempting to yell out to the people on the bus when we know that Charlotte doesn't. And I know that she's feeling horrible and all that sort of stuff, but she could have been starting to yell so people could understand what was going on. I don't know. It just didn't sit right. And that whole, they start to stay conscious. Let's list the composers we know in alphabetical order. And I was just like cringeworthy. Just anyway, but I'll finish up. My favorite line of the film was on the bus. So I will finish with that. Okay. My favorite line on the bus was when Lizzie's like, I'm going to shit myself. I just laughed. I thought that was funny. so there
she was adamant about it too.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
All right. So the next thing I like kind of ties into everything was that first reveal. The reveal that Charlotte was in on the whole thing. She basically set this entire thing up just when things were getting a little bit crazy on the bus. And obviously they got off the bus. She'd given her a butcher's knife. She turned. She'd had her where are the keys Rose moment when she's like, well, you know what you got to do, and gives her the butcher's knife. I'm like, oh, you sneaky bitch. You realize she's in on it. And again, there was enough glimmer of suspicion for this to work because, you're not sold on Charlotte at all. There's something off about her. And so this movie just changes direction. Okay, here's this girl, really jealous. She's actually taking out the competition. Somehow she's going to find herself back into this house and back in this academy. This is the movie I'm watching. All right, cool. I can handle that. And then the next scene that I really liked was that second direction change. And it all basically kicks off when we get back to the house, and Charlotte's gone inside, and she's basically said to Anton, I'm here to save her from you. And I'm like, what? There's something more here. We're going to go on another direction here. And I think the thing that sticks out for me the most is that Anton kind of like stammers and he sort of chuckles a little bit. And then he gives this most chilling look. Like Steven Weber absolutely nails this look. And the tone entirely changes. And that sort of happens when you see the flashback and you first see him naked, obviously blurred out, but naked. And you're like, holy hat, this movie is, again, not what I thought it was going to be. So you go through these two different rabbit holes, which just as a general film lover, I just appreciated being pulled along and strung along, but still believing everything that happened. And then just the last couple of things that I liked, obviously when Charlotte had to play for them at the end and they bring in Zhang Li almost as bait. There's a moment where Anton just puts his hand on her shoulder and she just shivers. And that shiver was just so perfect because the intensity in this scene, I guess it's palpable in the room that you're sitting in. And Zhang Li doesn't know anything about what's going on, but that innate feeling that something's off with this man was really strong. The final scene that I have to put in there is, it's kind of like a combination of two scenes really, but the final knife fight was just insane. And the final shot of that knife fight, it just, because this film wasn't a overly gory film. There was obviously some stuff with the bus and things like that. But then when they just started slashing limbs and slashing throats and stuff, that was like, wow, we're going all out for this, for this finale. And that final shot, it just took things to a brand new level of him obviously sitting there, sewed up with the mouth, sewed up with the eyes, got his arms and legs sewed off, and he's sitting there like Elijah Wood in Sin City. And it absolutely sticks with you, that final shot. And it's almost just purely for a visceral experience that they've put it there. But I'm not going to forget that in a long time. And I don't know why, but I just felt satisfied with it. Maybe the story, I didn't care. They were both sitting there playing the cello with their two mangled hands and helping each other out. But that final shot of him sitting there was just weirdly satisfying. I just thought, what have I just watched? But thank you for taking me on this journey.
Good. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to that. That was it was good. You put it all together very nicely. And yeah, if you're still with us and you haven't seen the film, sorry. So I mentioned that that line about shitting herself on the bus. The other part about this film that I didn't mind too much was that neck tattoo of the music note, because that got me thinking very early when we saw it on one neck and then the other neck, and then my thoughts and like me trying to figure out what was going on. I was like, is she sort of taking over her body or transforming into her body? So I thought there was like some sort of supernatural element. So it had me going, and then obviously brought back down very quickly when we worked out what was actually going on. So
you're still kind of right to think that there was something wrong with it and something significant with it.
Yeah. But I was way off, so it's all good. All right, what are some things that you didn't like in this one?
Look, there's not too much. I do want to mention, and again, I've never been to Shanghai specifically, but have you ever seen a billboard of a cello player promoting beer? Like, is that the endorsement that you want?
I've got that in my questions for later. Have you ever seen a cellist with a billboard that large? No, I haven't.
Look, it was promoting beer as well, because first I thought it was just a billboard of her, but then if you actually look, it's wrapped around and there's actually beer. Like she's literally selling like, Tsingtao or something.
No, and I couldn't even name a cellist.
I know. So that was a bit weird. And the other thing I didn't really like was, and I found this interesting to find out later on, that Allison Williams learned how to play the cello, but I wasn't buying her playing the cello. She looked weird playing, and I don't even know what you're supposed to look like playing the cello. But Logan Browning looked like she was genuine, and I'd never seen Logan Browning in anything before. But maybe she's a cello player. But Allison Williams looked off. So
okay. Fair.
That were the two things that didn't sit well with me.
So for me, when the girls are sort of meeting and we're seeing like the group of young kids playing, and they're just observing the parents in the crowd, and Lizzie's pointing out the cheating parents sort of thing, and one of the mums is sort of grabbing the genital area of another dad, and just the comment from Lizzie was like, we shouldn't spy, but that gets me wet. And then what sort of leads into her sort of being into girls in the next scene. It just didn't. I don't know. I was like, it didn't.
I think there's a lot of sexual confusion with Lizzie purely because of she's been getting raped for majority of her life. So I think it was important to set up that sexual notion, because it's a big factor for them in the rest of the film.
Just felt real awkward. Maybe that's what they needed me to feel. The when they get off the bus and Charlotte pulls that meat cleaver and chop the arm off, it didn't really shock me. And maybe this is what I talked about before with Allison Williams, but I was just like, I was waiting for something to happen. So yeah, okay, it's happened. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I just needed, I don't know. And I think that if you go into and you're like, oh my God, what the hell's happened here? Then that works really well. But it just didn't for me.
I think there needs to be a level of understanding though. Like, I was the same. Like I was shocked without being blown away because there's something off with this character, and they're kind of setting you up to thinking that she is jealous of Lizzie's character. And so when it happens, you're like, whoa, I'm buying it though. And that's sort of worked.
And like the back end, I was definitely getting into it a lot more once we had that switch, and we were seeing the two working together. I was definitely getting into it, and then it lost me again right at the end when I think it was Lizzie said, "We're going to cut your balls off and sell them as trinkets to Anton," and that lost me. I was like, "Nah, that's not a line of dialogue you say out loud."
This is a girl who was gonna use a stump.
I know.
Charlotte.
That
was all right, was it?
I almost put that in as things that didn't stand right. But yeah, oh my God. Anyway, let's lead into some thoughts and some ideas about what this was trying to say. And I think we've touched on quite a bit of them already, but let's go for it.
Yeah, look, I said like I was a lot more engrossed in the film techniques to shift the story around and keep me really hooked in what I thought was this, as I said, Contagion-esque story that turned into basically a crazed up revenge movie. So whilst there were some nice themes that are really important to talk about, it wasn't the reason why I really liked this film. But I think the idea of being oppressed by a man in power and making it feel like you deserve these disgusting acts that are being taken out. And as I said, this institutionalized behavior that is really difficult to escape from, all comes through really clearly. And that's obviously the one big theme, and the second big theme is just purely revenge.
Yep. Yeah, that revenge, that you need that revenge to almost survive too. They're victims. They need validation of their pain. They need to say what we've gone through wasn't right. And it all comes from that power of that, like I mentioned before, that domination, that brainwashing, the abuse, and the need to take that back a little bit. And although it sort of leads to this idea of like competition, that competition almost leads to this idea of that survival as well, to navigate this and overcome that victimization, and like that musical idea too of like a duet, like the two of these girls working together and the power that they have working together. And obviously we mentioned too that final shot of them playing together is that bringing that all together.
That's strong.
Yeah, it was a strong shot. Yeah, definitely. All right, what did you take away from this one?
Firstly, the cello makes a really great sound. I've never really heard a cello isolated, I don't think. I've never really thought about it, but I enjoyed the sound of the cello throughout this movie. Nice. I might even jump on Spotify and listen to a few.
No, you won't.
Cello
Don't
tracks.
lie. Don't lie.
I might do it. It might be a nice way when I'm cooking dinner or to wind down.
What was the movie we watched the other week? The reggae. So you're going to listen to reggae as well as some cello.
I already do listen to reggae. I like reggae. Reggae is part of my repertoire, but cello would be an addition. So, look, I would have loved to have seen this in a cinema. I was really engaged, and a dark cinema would have really taken this to another level. With all that said, and obviously I did like this film, I reckon I'd have trouble recommending it. It feels really polarizing, and I went into this podcast today expecting you not to like the film, and I think if I recommended it to someone, there's a big chance they'd come back and be like, what the hell have you just made me watch? So it does become a little bit difficult in that sense to try and figure out who's going to like this film.
I think it just proves that, we know each other pretty well. I expected you to enjoy this too. So
that's a great point.
It's nice that, after 150 something episodes together, we've worked out our film tastes. But talking about the film, I guess, I think this is a really good, if you're talking about the technical way of this film being put together, I think this is a really good example of how point of view can be so important in narrative storytelling. And the rewinds, obviously, and I think I read something about talking about how they wanted to keep the budget as tight as possible, so they didn't have a lot to go back and redo those rewinds in different ways, just sort of single shots that sort of changed a little bit. Without that point of view for the first half coming from Lizzie, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand that's the whole point of it. Without if you're seeing it from Charlotte's point of view, it's not impactful at all. So it's a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that part of the film actually copped some criticism online, some of the reviews that I read. But I agree with you. I think it actually did a really good job of capturing that.
Definitely. Good. Did you go into IMDb to check anyone out?
I did. And I'm hoping you didn't jump on. Did you jump on for Anton?
No.
Good. So Steven Weber. As soon as I saw him, I was like, I recognize this guy. He is in a movie that we've done on Flix Forum.
Coin Heist?
No. Probably around the same time. It was Heater was on the podcast during this time. You're not going to get it.
Well, tell me.
he was in the movie Handsome.
Ah, okay.
He was like the main killer or the actor so you know how at the start of the film there's a guy like
the pool party.
Hi, I'm the killer of the film, or whatever. That's him. So
cool.
That was a good one because as soon as I recognized the face.
That's an excellent.
So there you go. That was
well done. Good job. Yeah, I jumped on for Logan Browning, Lizzie, because just that familiar face, and the only thing I think that I possibly saw was that Bratz movie, the live action Bratz movie, which I I don't know why I'm saying I've watched it, but yeah, that's all. So let's move on.
I didn't even know there was a live action Bratz movie.
There was. It was woeful. Yeah.
I liked Logan Browning, man. I liked her. I hope she does more stuff.
Good. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah, it's probably a long-winded question. I'm curious about the other students over the years. I mean, this is clearly an insanely successful academy that's obviously making lots of money and making lots of money for Anton specifically. No one wanted to speak out about it. How deep does this raping, how deep does it all go? Is it just the uber elite who actually get exposed to this kind of thing? Or did everyone just close their mouth until a gruesome knife fight had to derail everything?
It's probably a good point too. Like you think about these Hollywood actors that we've seen where there's obviously a lot of people that have kept their mouth shut and hidden the truth of what's been going on because they don't want the truth coming out, because they don't want it to impact their careers. They don't want it to impact their kids. In this movie, they probably don't want, they want that fame and fortune for their kids. So how complicit are some of the parents in this? Are they aware of what's going on, especially those ones that are standing in the crowds watching these performances? There's got to be some sort of thought that something isn't right somewhere. So I think that's a really good question. There's probably no right answer, but it's probably a mixture of everything.
There's a level that it only happens when you get to that room, and you only get to that room when you are at a certain top-notch standard. Do they allow you to play in that acoustic perfect room? And you have to. And maybe that's only. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Maybe it's only when you get to that point that they go, no, we need to push you to a whole new level that normal techniques won't get you to. Yeah, it just found it interesting.
Anything else?
No. Look, maybe, okay, I had a question about, I didn't write it down, but I've been thinking about it as to whether, and it's gone. So you asked me a question. If I think of it, I'll come back to it.
So obviously, Charlotte traveled to Shanghai with her mother's medication, with more than likely the intention of carrying through with this plan. So there's a little bit of premeditation in it, I guess. Is the research or her understanding that Lizzie was into girls that led to them getting together, and then her asking her on the trip, or did she know that Lizzie had already planned a break? How it just seemed like a lot of, well, I'll take her home, I'll give her drugs, and I'm expecting her to ask me to go on this trip with her. Like, what if she never asked her to go on the trip with her?
Well, you got to remember that when they first started having a chat that night, when she told her she was going on a trip, she was basically pushing her, being like, "So you're never going to leave the academy? Never, 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 never." And like there was a level of her being like, "This is I'm gonna coax her out of it." And I think she probably had to adjust a little bit on the fly as to how far she was going to go. I think you can still follow through that plan without going on the trip with her if you can still get a chance to give her the medication. And
true, they could have just chilled in the hotel all day and done it in the hotel room.
Yeah, yes. So there's levels of it that could have worked either way. You're right. It's way convenient that it was going to play out exactly the way it played out. But I do like when I think back, I'm like, okay, why are you pushing so hard about her being back in the academy? But then in your head at the time, you're like, you really want her spot in the academy. That's why you're making sure that. So it kind of works both ways for me.
All right, last little one. So Anton, his aim was he wanted to see these two girls play together. So he gets that at the end. Is that some sort of satisfaction that doesn't like it's like, I know it happened earlier in the film as well, so you got to see him play earlier in the film anyway. I don't know, just him getting that satisfaction like with that setup, it doesn't sit right with me. So he's just looking into it too much.
No, it's a good point, but here's why they would have done it, is because he is so adamant on doing anything he can to hear that song, whatever it's called, completely perfect in that room at any cost. So at any cost to the girls who are trying to play it. Now, the flip side is they're saying, how badly do you want to hear this? Because we are going to mutilate your entire body, but your ears are going to be completely intact, and we're going to play it for you, and it's going to be perfect. Now tell me how satisfied you actually are. I think that's what they're trying to do. Like, this is what you wanted at all costs. So we're going to do it for you, but you're going to sacrifice absolutely everything that you have, the way that we've had to sacrifice everything that we have.
Excellent response. Well done. Yeah.
You can't tell me you're sitting there going, lucky bastard, got to hear them play one more time.
Not at all. I just... no.
I know what you're saying.
Not at all. I was just like, I think this was my issue with him as the character more, was that I needed him to be more of a clear-cut villain. So then it's like, you deserve exactly what you're getting.
He got his comeuppance. He doesn't end the movie.
How long do you reckon they keep him alive? Just keep him alive forever and a day.
Great point, isn't it? It's such a good point.
Because they managed to get a drip and all that sort of stuff, keep the cops away. They're doing pretty well. Everyone else is dead in the house, lying around. So.
They did do very well. There's a few girls upstairs, girls and boys upstairs, just sleeping through all that. Kids.
They walk down, there's porn on the floor. Oh, there's those other two dudes on the floor. Oh, she's pissed herself and died. What's going on?
Look, these two girls with one arm each are just...
Oh, God. All right, well, let's wrap this one up, and where we put our thoughts together and give it a rating out of 5. Where are you finishing off with this one?
Like, this was a roller coaster for me. It was a roller coaster of direction, of emotions, and even just the test that it gave my ability to stomach what was on screen was part of it as well. But I was completely in for it. I was captivated. I was intrigued, and some scenes and shots have really stayed with me in the last few days, and I think will continue to. Despite the perverse nature of some of the content, I was captivated, and I was excitedly surprised with the mystery of the journey. I'm actually thinking of changing. I am going to say 4 stars.
Nice, good. I think that's a good point to start off with, and I think the production values for this were pretty high. I think the narrative for me, where you've got such an important issue that's like, it's a polarizing issue that some people are some people are going to be really upset when they see this film without any warning, which can be a tough thing. And I think it's a really important issue, and I think good on them for trying to put it through. It just didn't come through in a good enough way for me. And I think possibly if we get a better performance for the character from Lizzie, we recast Charlotte, it might have got over the line for me for a little bit of a higher score, because I probably would have connected with it a little bit more. So I'm giving it a 2. So it gives us a 3, which I think isn't too bad.
That's what you had with my 4. It made your 2 not look as bad.
Oh, God. 2, well, I was thinking you're probably going to think I was going to lower.
No, I thought you were going to go 2.5, to be honest.
2.5. No, good. Almost. I was thinking. I was like contemplating. I was like, do I put this up higher? I was like, nah, stay in there. So we are on socials. We've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We sort of talked about this before. I just wanted to know, like, that idea of Anton sitting there. Do they let him live? Do they let him listen to the music for the rest of his life? Do they just wait until that bag's dripped out and then let him sit there and rot? Like, what do they do with him?
To be honest, I'm kind of satisfied with any of those responses.
Yeah, it's a let's hear your most gruesome way of letting him cark it.
Did you? How were you when you saw that shot? Because no one was expecting it, right?
It's a good point. I don't even like. Yeah, I expected to see them playing together. I guess because I think we needed that validation that that Lizzie can still play. As an audience, you needed to see that she's been able to get back. But yeah, it's a good point. I probably wasn't expecting him to still be sitting there.
No, not in that state. It was. I think I just appreciated the level they went to. Like, they're just like, we're going all out in these last 5 minutes, by the way, guys.
Yeah. Well, we're back again next week we're jumping back to 2019. We've got another sci-fi, which it's a sci-fi adventure called Rim of the World. Adventure. Yeah, it's directed by one of our favorite Netflix directors, I reckon, McG, who did Babysitter.
Oh, no, yes!
Yeah.
Yes!
It stars Jack Gore, Maya Sech, Benjamin Flores Jr., and Alessio Scalozzo. So that's what we've got for next week.
Great. Why have I heard of this movie?
It was huge.
Okay.
When it was released, it was everywhere. This was, we're in that stage where Netflix were pumping stuff out. This was huge when it came out.
Cool. Yeah, the name massively rings a bell. All right, this is good. We're a nice little stretch here.
Yeah, it's we're at that stage where we've missed out on a few international films for a couple of weeks, and I don't want to jinx us. We'll probably get some soon, but we're getting some ones that they put a bit of money behind, I guess is the better way of saying it.
That's very true. We haven't had a rom-com for a few weeks too, as well. They normally placed pretty consistently in between the slots.
We've got one the week after. I can promise you that.
Okay.
As usual, it's been good to see you. So thanks for a chat. I'm glad you enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, thank you for chatting. I had to talk to someone about it.
Yeah, excellent. And I'll see you next week.
See you then.